So this evening we can look at what we call divine grace. I suppose all grace has to be divine because in some dialogue before this, I was looking for what we mean by grace. And we came up with the idea that maybe there is a free gift there, something freely given with no caveats, something that has an aesthetic value and something that we can respond to if we understand what it is, where it is, and what does it mean. And we won't be too hard pressed to find out. So, because we live in a world of causation, a kind of sowing and reaping thing, sometimes whatever we relate to in the world will require some kind of response. Either we like it or we dislike it. Either we accept it or we reject it. And therefore, there's always a caveat. It doesn't have to be like that. Now we can say the grace of the BBC is always flowing. The BBC is broadcasting. We don't have to go to a place in London to catch it. We don't have to have it sent from there to every individual house. As long as we have a suitable transistor, in the old examples, transistor, and the will to tune in, we'll catch it. And it's right here. The electromagnetic field is all around us. We have to tune, and we tune it here. But then what is stopping us from tuning? Well, there are many distractions, and despite the fact that we want to tune it in, because we're driven by something within us, namely, some urge for perfection is there, which drives us forward to develop. It can come out in ways we take for granted. It can come out in competition. It can come out in just a wish to do the best. It can come out in students comparing their performance with each other. In many directions it can come. It can come in doing the best. But you see, when you watch a sunset or look at a sunset or sunrise, you're not really trying to achieve anything. You can't take that sunset or sunrise and put it in your pocket and take it home and sell it on eBay. So, there are certain things in our life that have some kind of intangible aesthetic value, and we're attracted to it and we want to stay. We don't want any reward from it. And sometimes we lose the aesthetic value when we look at it briefly for 2 seconds and rather take a photograph. And we used to say that, tourists used to do that. Let's say St. Paul's Cathedral, 2 tourists visiting from, well, let's say Japan. I'll do the inside, you do the outside, and then we go to the next spot, like that. So where's the moment where a person pauses and tunes their attention into what is there? And so our tuning mechanism we have, and the main tuning mechanism we have is called attention. And we can decide how to tune it, when to tune it. But the grace of the BBC is always there. And if we understand it, we can't then ask, when my transistor breaks down, where does BBC go? It doesn't go anywhere. It's already there. So the 19th century mystic Ramakrishna gave us that example. The wind of divine grace is always flowing. We have to just to set our sail. Now, setting the sail may sound easy. And there's no doubt it's the wind that blows the sail, because you and I can huff and puff, it won't move an inch. So setting the sail, anybody who does sailing will know the difficulty in it. You have to raise a mast. You have to make sure the ropes don't get entangled. But the lion's share of it is done by the wind. So there's a passage in the Bhagavad Gita which tells us, and I quote it many, many times, and you'll find it in the 6th chapter on meditation. There it says, Udared atmanatvanam matanam avasadayat atmaiva hyatmano bandhu atme varipo atmanaha. Let a person raise himself, herself, by himself. Let him not drag himself down. For he himself is his friend and he himself is his enemy. That means, let us not drag our attention down. Let us raise it up. Now, what is attention? You would think that all information will flow to us if attention is there, the object of attention is there, the means is there, everything is there for us to tune our attention. That means, therefore, that with all the equipment there, we should get everything in one go. But that will cause immense confusion. And so this attention is like a probe that settles on one thing and then another thing, like a bee settling on a flower, then selecting another flower, like that. You can't do all the flowers in one go. If you try to write a letter, and you're using the keyboard on a computer, you might say, the computer being there, the ideas in my head being there, my hands being there, fingers being there, and all the letters being there, I should simply press the letters. That'll be enough. But there has to be an ordering. Unfortunately, therefore, we have this river that we assume is there called time. That there's something in the past, in the present, and the future. And when we take our attention and settle it on the past, more than likely we are dragging ourselves down. And if we settle it on the future, more than likely we are dragging ourselves down. One making a doubt, the other making some kind of regret. But if we tune our attention into what is here and what is now, we'll catch the broadcast using the analogy. And we'll do it one letter after another, because we are not designed to do it all at once. As soon as we hear one thing with the possibility of, let's say, half a dozen sounds around, the others will fade into the distance until we shift our attention. We have some kind of probe like that is able to be direct and used and settled. And we can direct it any way we like, either to drag ourselves down or raise ourselves up. It's up to us. But the grace is always flowing. It's always available. It's up to us to tap our attention into it, tune into it. And when the tuning goes off, to have the capacity to notice it and retune it back again. What is concentration? Concentration is attention, making it dwell on one particular thing. And then as it wavers and goes off the bandwidth, we notice it and tune it back in again. What is spiritual life? Nothing more than continuous tuning, aligning until it becomes habitual. When it becomes habitual, then no more tuning is required as it used to be. We still can't neglect the tuning though. So we can raise ourselves up by ourselves or lower ourselves by ourselves. It's up to us. But it's no good asking, when will grace come? When will grace come? Look out of the window, is it coming now? Change my teacher, change my religion, change my mantra, change all of that. It's not going to come. Why? Because it's here already. It's no good meditating and saying, I'm trying to get the grace. No. The thought flow is the grace. It's continuously flowing. How we direct it, that's up to us. Lord, you're here. Okay, let me direct you here, direct you there. Thank you. Please go here. Please flow here. Please flow there. So we can have use our attention, but within the framework of time. And time comes in units. 1 second, another second, maybe even less than that. And if we are not careful, we won't notice this out of tuning. The mind wanders here, there, all out of tune. Okay, never mind, tune it back. So let a man raise himself up by himself. Let him not drag himself, for he himself is his friend. And he himself is his own enemy. You think the other fellow is your enemy? No, you yourself are that. And then the next stanza will go on. Bandhu atma tvanas tasya yana atma vatvana jitaha. And to him who has conquered, his self means his body and mind. By the self, that is the inner controller that stands back and is able to do this as an executive officer. For his own self is a friend. If you do that, you're a friend. What makes you a friend is if you've conquered the body and mind. Now, how do you conquer a body and mind? You have to re-register it. I'm telling these things time and again. So this is nothing new that I'm saying. So what we have to do is make a reevaluation. Am I the body? Am I the mind? What do we mean by the attention going away, dragging ourselves down? It's equivalent to an assertion. I am the vehicle, and for convenience sake, we can say there's an internal apparatus and an external one. Let's say the external one is what we call this accumulation of bodily cells made from yesterday's strawberries. That's all. Without the food that is put in, you'll see what happens, no doubt. Initially, you may lose a few pounds. That's okay. You might be delighted about that. But then how long will you sustain it? And the mind will also go. The mind is also dependent on that. So the mind is a comprehensive instrument, like a transistor, that has the capacity to tune in to the grace already available. And it has to be divine grace because there's no other gift that we have that doesn't have a catch to it, that doesn't have a caveat. Freely given. That loving entity investing in you, freely digesting your food, not asking for a wage increase or going on strike. Doing the same thing with thought, current continuously flow. Here, my child, use it well or not. Most choose not to. So this is not my body. We can re-register it to the result of divine grace. Just like a flower has appeared from a seed, has flowered into something, and the flowering process we call biological evolution. And a mind that has the capacity to inquire, to appreciate beauty, to analyze, to form relationships, to calculate, to understand the expression, which is we call art, culture, make an inquiry called science. What a remarkable instrument it is, but it is an internal instrument. If it was part of us, we'd have no hope of controlling it. If we can cut the leg off with gangrene and so on, and put it in a bucket and say goodbye, and I say, well, I'm not the leg. The leg was a part. Well, if the cut off leg has nothing to do with me, and the cut on leg is also nothing to do with me. Cut on or cut off, these are parts. And parts can be replaced with prosthetics. And most most organs of the body, we have a prosthetic solution sometimes too. We'll be walking around, living much longer. Why? Because we're walking around on carbon legs or something, carbon fiber legs, or eyes already. It's like that. So every part, more or less, can be replaced actually. I remember when they first did the first heart transplants in Cape Town, Dr. Bernard, and they were wondering how long will it last, because there'll be a rejection mechanism. The body will turn around and say, these cells don't belong to me. So try and get rid of them, please. Now maybe they've gotten around that a little bit. So with increasing science, but it all requires somebody having, first of all, an interest, passion, a dedication, and intelligence. And then something a problem is there, and somebody finds a way around it. So what is life? Life is a set of obstacles that we are designed to get around. We're part of the Universal Olympic team that knows how to get around obstacles. And the key to that is take your attention and shift it towards something that is freely given, which means beyond our small limitations and coming from within. So it's already here. We don't have to go and catch it. The grace of the BBC is always flowing. We just have to tune it in. Then it says, so conquering, that is the mind, body and senses, by the controlling self. Atman is the expression, the divine self. His own self then is a friend, but to him who has not conquered his self, his own self acts like an enemy. You're like a car having utility. So we can redirect our attention in a more pleasurable way and get distracted from the central goal, because grace is not only flowing, but when we tune into it, it uplifts us. It elevates us in a divine way. And we're all looking for joy and happiness, but most of our efforts drag us down. So we have to have a different formula to raise the mind upwards. And so it goes on. How do you do all this? How do you control all this? Well, it says, Jitatmana prashantasya, the self-disciplined and serene person remains steadfast. Like the example of building a house on sand or rock. Rock will be firm. You can't shake it. Sand, it'll be shifting. In Ireland, many houses have been constructed on pyrite. And people have had to shift out and find temporary accommodation while whole construction crew comes in and sorts the problem out. If they had identified the problem in the beginning, pyrite is fool's gold. That's good. It's made from iron and sulfur and so on. But you see, when rainfall comes, it becomes acidic and starts eating away at your foundations. So it's much better to build a rock. So remain steadfast in the Supreme Self, in cold and heat, pleasure and pain, as well as honor and dishonor. In other words, when you catch on to that, you don't mind which way you will be blown. Whether it's toward hot or cold is indifferent. It's not my body. So I did a 620-kilometer cycle ride some years back in 4 days, raising funds. And people thought, so did you practice? I had 1 or 2 rides. Oh, okay. But you see, as soon as you think this is a machine mounted on another machine and off we go, then you won't feel any pain in the legs or anything. Of course, afterwards you may do it, but during it you won't do it. As soon as the attention shifts to the body, the pain comes. Shift it away, it's gone. So, in cold and heat, pleasure and pain, as well as honor and dishonor. Pleasure and pain. We like flattery. If the flattery is not coming, if there's criticism instead, we immediately have a reaction. Our attention goes toward that, drags our mind down and others with it, and comes out as resentment, anger, and so on. I'm not sure who I mentioned it to, but you see, you've noticed how cows chew the cud. It's because they have to digest something and they have 4 stomachs to do it. So maybe it goes through one stomach, comes back, and it gets broken down like that. The cellulose in the grass gets broken down, and we get milk at the end of it. Wonderful. But we find that the human being also is chewing the cud of resentment. Chewing, 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 and bringing it back, dragging the mind down. Whereas the divine grace is flowing. We never tuned it. So in honor and dishonor, somebody praises me, oh, you gave a wonderful talk. Oh, thank you. I could hardly hear and you spoke a lot of rubbish. Oh, okay. What can we do? Then, if you stand supreme, what will be the result? You'll regard equally well people who wish you well, friends, as well as so-called enemies, neutrals, arbiters, the hateful, the relatives, all of the same, the saints and the sinners alike. We put a saint on the pedestal, wonderful. That's all wonderful. But you see, actually, the saint and the sinner at rock bottom is exactly the same. It's the same divine self. No difference whatsoever. This is an outlook of democracy, seeing the same everywhere. It's not democracy based on even distinguishing characteristics of poverty or wealth or education or ignorance or any of these things. It's absolutely that underneath it all, it is all equal. When we fail to notice that, then we get hurt by those who seemingly attack us, whether they do it deliberately or not. So, isn't that dragging yourself down into a place of mental difficulty, disturbances, obsession? Somebody, this person said that. Then how can I face them tomorrow? What will I say to them? All of this occupying the mind is equivalent to howling noises when our tuning goes away. And so we have to take our attention that arrives. We have some example of that, yes. You take a car, there's a rotor that rotates and fires off enough charge to push a piston down, explode the fuel and pull a piston down. And then the other one comes up. We have 4 pistons, they don't all move up and down together. They move in a certain pattern. 1, 3, 4, 2, 3, etc. Like that. So in that same way, we use the faculty of time as our friend and assess what is appearing in the mental field at any given time. Is it something that will lift us up or drag us down? Now, if you're really tuned into this divine glory, this grace that is ever flowing, it would be something like a river flowing through the medium of time. And in a river, well, we can see the characteristics. When you swim, the water goes around you and supports you. Because water is a continuous thing, you can't create a vacuum, only temporary. Temporary void comes and the water itself fills it in, fills it in, fills it in. So grace is something that continuously flows like that. That's why we can think of it in terms of river, And probably it's the reason why rivers are regarded as sacred, something that is always flowing. So in India, the Ganga is sacred. All the waters are sacred, and many rivers are called Godavari. Go means cow. So what is the cow? A symbol of divine grace, because it gives us free things that we can drink, nourishing things. You may think, well, I'm allergic to milk or something. That's not the point. A wonderful machine that kindly offers us motherly milk for our sustenance. And how can we kill an animal like that when it's so loving and giving freely? Wonderful, marvelous machine, just the mechanics of it. Put grass in one end, milk comes out the other. In any country where there is famine, powdered milk comes in. So milk supplies us with fats and proteins and all the rest of it, all good. And vitamin B and all the rest of it comes into it. So some may think that bananas and milk is the ideal diet because the two complement each other if you can digest such a thing. So then in chapter 5, we also have this understanding, because it tells us as a precursor to the chapter 6. The embodied soul, who has subdued the senses, having mentally renounced all action. All systems require renunciation to access this divine grace. It doesn't mean to say you have to go off into a cave. It doesn't mean to say you have to give everything up, give life up. It means that you have to re-register the effects of all your actions to the real owner. The real owner is divine, because you are not digesting your food. And before we formally went into the Zoom broadcast, we were a cake that was made by more than 100 people. We discovered, no, the whole universe has made this, actually. Where does the carbon come from? Organic life is essentially carbon and oxygen with other things also. But anything that doesn't have the carbon component is not considered organic life. So organic chemistry is centered around carbon. Where does it come from? Originally, they thought it came from a cosmic explosion. Everything came from there. But then they discovered, no, not so. It comes in the belly of exploding stars. And so when people say we are stardust, yes, all the chemical compositions that we identify, this is me, this is me, this is me, they all come from stardust. The whole universe has conspired to make a thinking, moving, breathing entity called you. What a wonderful thing that is. But how do we register it? We take ownership for it. Instead of doing that, we should rather give it to the real owner. Lord, this is yours. It gives us then a sense of instrumentality. Then what are we doing and why are we doing it? Anything short of registering it in an instrumental way will be selfish, egoistic. And selfishness blocks this flow of grace, because we are asserting, let me do it. It's like the Lord saying, come on, my child. I'm giving you something free, a free gift. And we say, no, I'll do it. I'll go and purchase it somewhere else. So that's the difficulty. So we have to learn to re-register everything to its divine origin that comes out in expression. So in the meditation we did earlier, we understood that all of this is combinations of divine waves dancing. You might say it's God's grace, divine grace, freely given. And what will we do with it? Let us take, for example, thought. The thought arrives within a framework, called a second, let's say. the same way as the rotor on a motor car's arm goes and hits every point alternately, not all at once. It goes in a sequence. So time is our mechanism, of our means of making sure that not everything is happening at the same time. Then we can have some control on it. So when something arrives and a blank second, call it a blank check, never been used before, and comes in a series like that, what will we put in it in the face of the fact that already we have filled some other things which have dragged us down? Just because our habit level has produced it. It's a response. So our reaction naturally is from the place of our habit, a knee-jerk reaction. So what will we do? How do we control it? We have to observe that knee-jerk reaction. Don't suppress it. Allow it to come, allow it to go. Treat it as a friend. Come if you want, stay if you can, have a cup of tea, go if you must. But I have new friends. And if you object to me not entertaining you and my other friends from when I was 4, 5, 6 years of age, where I got angry, resentment, and out of control, I'll say that might have been useful then, but now it's no longer useful. Let me put something new in. Values of strength and truth and beauty and goodness and love and harmony, bring that in. Saturate the mind with that. Then what happens? Now there's a useful passage in the Katha Upanishad, and it tells us that not by learning, not by any of those things, not by using our intellect, not by analyzing, not by doing rituals, not by none of this, but only that which is revealed by the self. The self chooses. So this is called grace. It is not up to us. It is up to some entity that is always there, always flowing, and working for us, through us, in us, beyond us, always available in this present moment. And so we can revalue the whole thing. The Mundaka Upanishad opens with a beautiful statement, one section. It tells us, Purusha evadam vishvam karma. The Purusha is all this, all what? The Purusha, I have to explain, Purusha derived from two Sanskrit terms, Puri, a city, and Purna, meaning fullness. Her name and mine, actually. Fullness. So in case you think that is confined. Now, the Bhagavad Gita also, in the 5th chapter, gives us an image of a 9-gated city. Katha Upanishad gives us 11-gated city, belonging to one who is always steady, whose consciousness is unflickering, who is ajna, unborn. Unborn consciousness, all unflickering. See, even an electronic candle, you'll find a little flickering. Otherwise, we think that it's just a portrait. If there's a flickering thing, it's simulating the unsteadiness of a candle, because many other forces will be there. A slight breeze, and the fact that there's an activity going on, some consumption is going on, naturally the flame will flicker. Imagine that inside this 11-gated city called a human body, 7 gates here, eyes, nose, ears, mouth, and then a royal entrance at the top of the head, and then the navel, and then the organs of procreation, evacuation, and so on, all in all, like that. 11 gates. Belonging to what? Belonging to an emperor, whose presence, and by virtue of that presence, everything operates. If you take the supervisor away, then everybody will be lazy and put their tools down. As soon as they know something is there, somebody is there, then they'll start working. So it's like a city, functioning like a city, with all the elaborate highways and bypasses, with waste disposal units, with trains delivering nutrient goods, all of that, like a city, belonging to this one, unborn and flickering. So that is the meaning of Purusha. Purusha is that fundamental royal entity in you. It is your own divine self. Anyway, it's not just in you, because according to this passage, the Purusha is all this, not inert, is all this. What? The universe, karma, action, austerities, the absolute, the highest immortal. He who knows this one hidden, deep within the cave of the heart, you can say as it were, rends asunder all knots of ignorance. What are we suffering from? Why isn't it that we don't voluntarily tune in to this flowing grace? It is because we fundamentally either don't know it's there, we bypass it, or we use it occasionally when we want. So, and we don't notice when the tuning goes off. When the attention wanders, we don't notice. I'll probably put a light on. Yeah. So this is technically called ignorance. What is ignorance? Ignorance is the assumption that I am a psychophysical unit, that I am the body, I am the mind. It doesn't work when you drive a car. When you drive a car, you say, I open the door. There's my car at a distance. Of course, the car is always feminine. I don't know why. And then we get in, we sit down, we take the steering wheel, and we know how to shift the gears. Now, within the psyche, we have 3 gear shifts. We have the lowest, which is to do with dullness, laziness, ignorance, darkness. We can shift it up to an attitude of enthusiasm, dynamic activity. But both of these attitudes are damaging to us because they are self-centered, they're egocentric, and come from a series of sophisticated biological responses. And then the third one is to create some harmony, to uplift the mind with nobler values. And once we do that, then the others get neutralized. And the Kathopanishad is telling us that it is the self that reveals itself. We don't do it by study or intellectual analysis or gymnastics. We do it by clearing the way, and it reveals itself. It chooses us, as it were. And so we cannot do without this grace. This divine grace is absolutely necessary. It is useful and helpful to us. It is the wind that blows the sail. Our small huffing and puffing doesn't do it. What is the result of it? We get out of breath, go red in the face, and start cursing. Say, he who knows this renders asunder what? Ignorance, but knots, the knots of ignorance. And these knots we call gunas. Technically, sattva, rajas, and tamas. These are the knots that hold fast our ignorance. Our ignorance means we are not seeing the world as it should be seen. We get also the reference that we found for the Kathopanishad, section 2 and 2.1.23 in the Kathopanishad. But you'll notice all of this is coming from the Upanishads. So what are the Upanishads? Maybe your next question. Upanishads literally meaning sitting near. We assume sitting near a teacher. And written in such a way, cursory language, so that you can get it, but it requires commentaries. So this seems to be access to the truth that we take provisionally, because proof is something that is subject to our own discovery. Now, if we say that there is an entity inside, it means that all our actions are being done by remote control. Do we have examples of that? Yes. We send things up to, let's say, planets such as Mars. These are small robots. They sit on the surface and move around, all controlled from the Earth. Imagine, so far away. So imagine now that you have something moving, it infers either to one of two things. Either it's a mystery, we don't know how it works, or there's something behind it doing it. So the clues are always there. Let's give a funny example. Supposing I visit here for the first time, and you've made a kind of mechanism. When the Swami sits on the chair, it activates a robot that comes along and, knowing the Swami likes tea, produces a cup and pours the tea carefully in the cup. So wonderfully, he doesn't spill anything, and then does it, and the Swami looks at it, and then shifts a little bit, and the armrest activates milk and sugar going in. Not knowing that there was an automatic mechanism like that, will I not think it's some kind of magic? But you see, this whole world doesn't operate on that basis. It operates on the presence of something which is already there. And we may not know fully how it works. In fact, we don't know fully how it works because it comes under the heading of what is called Maya, related somehow to the word magic, no doubt. But Maya means that there's something inscrutable. We can never understand it. Something like a dream, but we take it as something real. Something that is impermanent but looks permanent. And without this mechanism, we're at a standstill. Nothing moves, nothing operates. But we have the capacity to transcend that. We have the capacity to bypass that. We have the ingenuity to do it. We don't have to wait for thousands and thousands of years, having a desire to fly, to evolve wings. Our human intelligence says, let me bypass all that and let me design some machine that will do it. An airplane. I have a desire, say, to go and visit, let us use Mars or the moon closer to hand, to explore what is there. Is it any different to us? And decide whether you like it or not. Some people say they don't like it, no atmosphere there. So anyway, we go there and see what is the face of the moon, okay, all craters and what have you. We want to see there and get some samples and take it back. And we do everything smoothly, all by remote control. Imagine. So that entity is doing everything by remote control. That emperor within this city, by its presence, is making things work. We have no ownership of it. The ownership that we have, the sense of ownership that we have, is false. It's our illusion. We cannot register the ownership to ourselves. So we have to transcend what we might call the prophet-actor complex. And say, I'm not doing it. So you can say the Lord of the universe is doing it for me. Why am I doing it? So that I can tune my attention into that. And in doing that, a flow of grace comes to me that has a transforming effect. Not just for me, but for all. I become an open channel for this divine grace to flow to all. Being, therefore, not just somebody who discovered it, but somebody now who shares it, who radiates it. That would be useful. So, these are some thoughts on divine grace. And I'm actually going to open it up for questions because, on Tuesday evenings we used to have rather than subject matters, we used to have question and answers, which developed a subject matter anyway. And so we might look at that. So I'm asking you for the second time whether there are any other questions.
Swami, see, if divine grace is always there and is so free flowing, how come such a huge percentage of the population miss it and don't manage to engage with it?
Yes, so here's the thing. They are engaging with it, they just don't know it. Because without it, legs don't move and eyes don't see.
Right. But they think they do it themselves.
Yeah. So without it, thought doesn't move. And the difficulty, the reason is because people think, I am thinking.
Yeah.
I am moving. Yes, I can decide to move until a fly lands on my nose, and involuntarily my hand goes and squats it.
Yeah.
So you see, this trap that we're involved in, which is the prophet-actor complex, it stops the flow of grace. But the flow of grace is always there. It's just our attention is not tuned into it. Why don't we all go and tune our attention into it? Because all of these things are unknown by most people. And of the thousands and millions, we can say billions of people on the planet, we know only a few will take advantage of that grace. It is through divine grace that you're all here. It is through divine grace that you got a clue that maybe you should look at things in a different way. Maybe your old formula is not working. It is through divine grace that you have some interest in these things. It is through divine grace that a matching movement comes to you, because every movement we have toward this divine will create 1,000 steps, as it were, toward us. And we can replace the analogy, instead of saying steps, we can say a flow, like a river. It's like a dam wall, you see. You've been to Zimbabwe, you've been to Lake Kariba, no doubt.
I haven't indeed yet.
Yes, and that's the largest man-made lake in the world, held back by a curved wall.
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, how to make that water flow? You have to open the floodgates. There's no other way. Now, we could do an alternative method. We could take a teaspoon and we could transfer water from one side to the other laboriously. I don't think it'll work. Even if you take a bucket and do it, it won't work. You have to open the floodgates, and then it easily works by itself. So what we need to do is a kind of opening process. We need to be generous of spirit, friendly to all, non-critical to anybody. You see, in other words, we have to make the ego an open channel for divine grace to flow, instead of making it a closing thing. Instead of restraining, we have to make it opening. So the floodgates in the analogy represent the key obstacles which we have, namely egocentricity, selfishness. And that's why we do the Enneagram, because we know these are not standard egos. They're all carefully crafted from our experience when we are 1 foot and everybody else is 6 foot. And we construct some defensive strategy, survival strategy, to deal with it, recognizing it, making friends with it, using it, not doing away with it, but using it for the good of others, welfare of others. The Bhagavad Gita gives us this wonderful term. The result of it is Brahma Nirvana. You see, in Buddhism, there's this term Nirvana, the extinction of all desires. Desires are the big obstacles that sustain, keep the ego going. So this use of the term Nirvana is not a Buddhist term. It's mentioned 3-4 times there in chapter 5 of the Bhagavad Gita. So it is this Brahma Nirvana, it is spoken of. And that means that there has to be an opening. rather than a closing. And then the flow that we get is called Brahma Nirvana. So that is chapter 5 of the Bhagavad Gita, and it leads us into, or chapter 3, sorry, chapter 5, and then it leads us into the subject matter there. So absolute freedom. He whose happiness is within. Now most of us, our happiness is without. And literally without. I don't have this, I don't have that. I want this, I want that. I want means I haven't got. So he whose happiness is actually within. I don't need to go and get something from outside. What is desire? A feeling there's a gap in me. It has to be fulfilled from outside. No, I'm quite happy on the inside. Who rejoices within, whose light is within, that spiritual aspirant, which we call a yogi alone, becomes Brahman, that is the highest supreme principle, and gains absolute freedom, gains insight and freedom. So it goes, Sa yogi Brahma Nirvanam Brahma Bhuto Digachati. That one alone becomes Brahman and gains absolute freedom, who delights in the happiness within. Is another, of course, that I'm tuning my attention to within. Not just within me, but the withinness in everything else. When I have the insight, the penetrating insight, to see the fundamental divine present in everything, every person, every place, every object, every event. And then in meditation in me, outside of meditation in others, inside meditation in me. With sins destroyed, doubts dispelled, senses controlled, devoted to the welfare of all beings, making an open channel of divine grace to flow. The wise people, the rishis, the seers, attain what? Absorption in Brahman. A beautiful statement. And then this absolute freedom is both here and hereafter. There's no time limit on it. For those renunciants, that is, those who have renounced this idea, I am the body, the mind, who have shed these two genetic directives and their subsequent frustration, lust and anger, subdued their minds and realized the self. Why anger? Because when I don't get what I want, I get frustrated. And a glorious frustration is called anger. A mild version of it is, yeah, I feel unsettled. So naturally, anger comes because of unfulfilled desires. That creates a frustration. The whole universe runs on it, runs on frustration, trying to get some kind of balance somewhere. We call this balance dharma. Subdued their minds and realized the self. That is how they realized the self, because they subdued the mind. Okay. Well,
Gaurav Mahagut Swamiji, or Swami McCree, Oscale guys, Swami of my heart.
well, Banach to you all. Blessing.
Thank you, article.
Grab Banacht
Yeah.
and Guru Mahagat.
Yeah.
Right. So that's fine. Okay. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.
Yeah.
Now we can relax a little bit. And now you may have questions, of course.
Well, it's a sort of, not so much a question, but a kind of perhaps it's a question. Just this whole thing of the idea of divine grace flowing continuously. And I was kind of thinking, my mind said, well, what happens when you die then? Is divine grace still flowing freely? And then I just thought to myself, of course.
It's like asking, when my transistor dies, what becomes of the BBC?
Yes, exactly.
It's an irrelevant question.
It's a completely irrelevant question.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it does away with all this karma and everything, all of that.
Yeah.
What happens to it? No, it's always flying. It's still there.
Yeah. And
What happens if my transistor gives up? You get another one. What happens if I don't have a transistor at all? What happens if I am the broadcasting station? Then this is called freedom. This is the Brahman Nirvana. I don't go anywhere. The difference is that I don't have to pay license fees.
Oh.
So we have to get into that habit of tuning into this grace that is always flowing. And so supposing you sit down for meditation and your mind is disturbed, it might occur to you that the flow, before it arrived at the disturbing interference, is all that divine grace flowing, like electricity flowing and arriving at the light bulb. And so what controls it is what we call upadhi. It means a limiting adjunct, something that is adjacent to the current. And we call this, you see, a limiting adjunct is what is translated in most of the texts. But why is it just a limiting adjunct? Why don't you think of it as a manifesting adapter? So the glory of the electricity comes out as light when we put a suitable adapter to it. So when we look at the whole universe, we're seeing multiple adapters everywhere. And behind it is this one current flowing. We tune into that. So when the light bulb bursts, where does the electrical current get reborn? What happens to it? It's an irrelevant question. It's always there. The light bulb's gone, that's all. Your limiting adapter had changed. And, many adapters. So when we look at the sun, it's an adapter. When we look at the moon, it's kind of a reflection of an adapter. When we look at the human body, it's an adapter. When we look at a squirrel, it's an adapter. A flower is an adapter. The bee is an adapter. It's the same current, all molding itself into all these different forms. That's all. Get used to thinking like that. Spend 20, 30, 40 years thinking like that. Repeat it 1,000 million times until it saturates your habit level.